Quickly go across to our correspondent Jagrati Dave, who's joining us live from Washington, D.C. for more updates as she's been consistently reporting on all the latest developments. A very warm welcome to you, Jagrati. Now, with regards to today's briefing, the U.S. President has, of course, admitted that the government's emergency stockpile of protective equipment is nearly exhausted, and there's much dismay already about how the president has also focused on drug cartels, taking the focus away from the pandemic. How do you view the criticism over the lack of central planning?
Well, this is something that many of the president's critics have been focusing on for several days now, this disjunct between the states and the federal government. There were reports suggesting that the federal stockpile of protective equipment was running low. And when asked about it, the president did indeed say, yes, it was near to depletion. But he said that was because the equipment that was arriving was being sent directly to hospitals and was not going into the stockpile first. Nonetheless, there was around 10,000 in terms of the amount of protective equipment that was in the stockpile that the president was quoting. And that is still not enough for if the pandemic worsens in other major cities as it has done in New York. So there are lots of concerns about this disjunct between state and federal government. Indeed, another question that was asked of the president was why he's not issuing a nationwide stay-at-home order. He's leaving it to the states to make those decisions, and several states have issued stay-at-home orders for their residents, but some haven't. Some have been slow, notably the governor of Florida.
Right. And that, in fact, brings me to my next question, Jagrati. The U.S. has now set a new one-day record for highest number of COVID-19 deaths. New York hospitals are overflowing with bodies, as we've seen some very chilling visuals of those bodies being moved to refrigerated trucks. Now, Bill Gates has said there is no middle ground to the battle with coronavirus and that a complete shutdown is the only way out. Why wouldn't New York do that?
So it's a difficult. It's one of those decisions that leaders are making between trying to obviously save lives, which is the number one priority that the president has talked about, that state governors have talked about as well, but also looking at the long term, looking at the effects of completely shutting down an economy. I mean, this is something that clearly harsher measures are being looked at centrally. As you said, the president is looking at stopping travel from hotspots like between New York and Detroit, for example, metropolitan cities. He's even considering closing down railways, but he did say that would be a huge step to take. There are critics again of the president, and people who suggest that the actions have been too slow, that some of these actions, some of these shutdowns, some of these social distancing recommendations should have been implemented much earlier in order to flatten the curve, in order to stop spikes as we have been seeing in cities like New York.
Right. And since you mentioned economy, there's been talk of contemplating ban on domestic flights, which you also mentioned. Now, from aviation to hospitality or even the retail industry, let's focus on the plight of the U.S. economy as unemployment is expected to rise drastically with major multinationals now announcing layoffs.
Yes, indeed. I mean, you look at the markets and the Dow Jones, the S&P 500 have all fallen again. Unemployment is a serious issue as many small businesses and many have had to close down completely. Non-essential businesses are the only ones staying open in several states across the country. Big businesses, I mean, airlines have been issuing warnings about their future, it being on the line, about the need for government funding. Otherwise, they will go bankrupt, to some of the warnings that are coming out. So there is a serious economic issue, and there's experts are suggesting that there's issues. There's a knock-on effect of the economy shutting down, as well as a knock-on effect of the pandemic spreading. So shutting down the economy also has further health implications, as people are struggling to feed themselves, are struggling to pay rent, etc. So there are lots of measures that small businesses, that landlords, etc., are trying to do to help individuals. The governments, there's small business loans that the government is trying to bring out as fast as they can. in order to help small businesses keep their employers. So these are measures, but yes, the economy is clearly taking a hit.
All right. Now, before I let you go, Jagriti, the United States has received a payload of medical supplies from Russia, while many critics are calling it Russia's PR machinery to escape sanctions. Some are also talking about the Kremlin's geopolitical edge, like China's, over the United States, which has traditionally been viewed as a world leader in global crisis. What do you make of the recent developments?
So the plane load of equipment from Russia, it's not the only place that the United States is getting equipment from. There's a Project Airbridge, so-called project, which is flights from various parts of the world bringing in personal protective equipment into the United States. There's been one from Shanghai. There's one expected from other parts of the world, Thailand, Vietnam, even India. And so this is something that the US governments are trying to work together, something that the WHO had said, something that the European Union had said, indeed after the president had issued a travel ban, that the countries need to work together to defeat this pandemic. And so things like Project Airbridge, things like these flights, yes, there will be questions about the politics of it, but clearly this is something that governments are doing with each other. President Trump has said that, once they have made enough ventilators, suggesting that private companies that are involved in making ventilators will make so many that there will be some sort of surplus that they will then be able to, the US will be able to send to other countries in need like Italy and Spain. But of course, that is a question that remains to be seen given the scale of the need here in the United States.
Absolutely. And this is the hour of the need where actually the entire world needs to unite at the moment. Thank you so much, Jagriti Dave, for bringing us all those details from the United States.